I've moved your inheritance into my name. I'm starting over with someone younger who actually appreciates me." Ethan's voice crackled over the phone, every word oozing the smugness I had come to loathe over the past few years. In the background, I heard the crash of ocean waves and the high, delighted laughter of a woman I didn't know. That golf trip he claimed to be on? It was nothing but a beachfront getaway with his new flame. The words hit me like a wave of ice water, but I didn't flinch. I sat perfectly still in my kitchen in Portland, Oregon, watching the steady drizzle blur the view beyond my window. 22 years of marriage were disintegrating before my eyes, carried away in the laughter echoing from his phone. I took a slow, steady breath, letting the silence stretch out between us. "You're right," I finally whispered, my voice calm and cold as steel. "You deserve it." Then I hung up. My name is Emma Carter, and I am 45 years old. I've spent my entire adult life being meticulous, cautious, maybe even a little too trusting until today. Today, something shifted inside me, like tumblers falling into place in a long locked door. Ethan thought he was clever. He thought that after more than 2 decades together, he could simply walk away with the inheritance I received 18 months ago from my late uncle, Uncle Raymond. What he didn't know was that I had learned exactly how to guard what mattered most, especially after watching him burn through every dollar of his own savings on his desperate midlife crisis: the motorcycle, the overpriced golf clubs, the designer suits he called networking investments. I poured myself a glass of wine and settled back at my kitchen table, the laptop before me still open to my bank's login page. I had been reviewing my accounts when Ethan's call came through, and now I traced the numbers with my eyes. $600,000, plus the family cabin in the mountains, my security blanket, my escape plan. I had hoped I would never need it, but Ethan's timing had been spectacularly bad. Uncle Raymond wasn't just wealthy, he was also paranoid, for good reason. He had lost his first fortune decades ago to a deceitful business partner and had rebuilt it with painstaking care. When he passed, he left me everything along with a thick folder of instructions on how to protect inherited wealth from predators and opportunists. I had followed those instructions to the letter. The phone rang again, Ethan's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. He could stew in his own uncertainty. He thought my quiet acceptance was weakness, but he was about to learn that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous. Outside, the rain continued its quiet descent, and a small, fierce smile curved my lips. Ethan had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and he didn't even know it yet. I wasn't the same naive college girl Ethan had charmed all those years ago. In the months following Uncle Raymond's death, I had spent countless evenings sitting across from Victoria Hale, a sharp, unflinching financial advisor who specialized in protecting inheritances from exactly the kind of betrayal I was now living through. Together, we had created a fortress around Uncle Raymond's gift, building a trust through Ironcrest Private Banking, a discreet institution known for multi-layered security measures and relentless fraud detection. Every asset was shielded behind protocols requiring multiple forms of verification, video identification, biometric scans, signed letters of intent. The accounts were structured so that no one but me, the sole beneficiary, could authorize substantial transfers. Ethan's name was nowhere on any document, not as a co-owner, not as a beneficiary, not even as an emergency contact. The only account where his name appeared was our joint checking account, and only because I had transferred a small portion of the inheritance into it to cover household expenses, just enough to avoid arousing suspicion. I had known even then that Ethan was restless, that he might try something reckless, but I hadn't expected him to call me and brag about it. His attempt to transfer the money must have been aimed at the joint account, assuming he could access everything from there. What he didn't know was that the bulk of Uncle Raymond's estate was locked away behind layers of security he could never breach. Not without codes only I possessed, codes I'd never written down or shared. I opened my laptop and pulled up the records Victoria and I had compiled. Each asset, each account, each safeguard was meticulously documented. If Ethan thought he could outmaneuver me, he was in for a brutal surprise. I remembered how Victoria had looked at me across her polished mahogany desk the first time I told her I suspected my husband might try to take what wasn't his. "Emma," she had said softly but firmly, "trust is a wonderful thing, but never confuse trust with blind faith. If someone ever tries to exploit your trust, you need to be prepared." Prepared I was. And now, thanks to Ethan's blundering arrogance, I was ready to act. The phone rang yet again. I let it go to voicemail once more. I could almost hear his frustration crackling through the silence. Ethan had probably expected me to scream, cry, or beg him to come home. Instead, I was mapping out the first steps of my plan: secure my inheritance, gather evidence, and protect myself legally. A knock on my front door startled me. It was a courier with an overnight package from Ironcrest. Inside was a thick envelope labeled Emergency Protocols, sent at Victoria's insistence when she learned of Ethan's attempted theft. The documents detailed every security measure in place and laid out the steps I should take now that someone had tried to access the trust without authorization. I read each page carefully. By the time I finished, a cold certainty settled in my chest. Ethan's arrogance had flipped a switch he couldn't turn off. His attempt had triggered automatic fraud alerts, not just at Ironcrest, but across every financial institution connected to the trust. Any future transactions would be flagged and frozen immediately. His social security number had been added to a watch list of potential threats, ensuring he could never get close to the inheritance again. And because the trust's protective clauses were so thorough, his attempted theft would now be considered a violation of our prenuptial agreement, a violation that would strip him of any claim to our marital assets. The storm outside grew heavier, but inside, I felt an unfamiliar calm. I hadn't just protected my inheritance, I'd built an iron wall around my future. And as Ethan's calls kept coming in, each more frantic than the last, I realized the man who thought he could steal everything from me had only ensured he would lose far more than he could imagine. The next morning, as dawn broke in muted shades of gray across Portland's skyline, I sat at my kitchen table with a steaming mug of coffee. For the first time in years, I felt strangely at peace. Ethan's frantic voicemails had continued through the night, his voice shifting from fury to desperation. He couldn't understand why the money wasn't transferring, why his threats weren't working, why I wasn't begging him to come back. He had no idea that every second he spent scrambling only tightened the noose he had thrown around himself. At exactly 7:15 a.m., my phone rang. Ethan's voice was ragged, trembling with barely contained panic. "Emma, what the hell is going on?" he barked. "I tried to move the money yesterday, and now the bank says everything's under investigation. They froze our accounts." I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the rich, dark roast. "Good morning to you too, Ethan. How's your vacation going?" I asked lightly. "Cut the crap, Emma Tomp," he snapped, his voice rising. "What did you do?" I looked out at the rain dancing across my window, every drop a reminder of the storm he had created. "I didn't do anything, sweetheart," I said softly. "But it looks like you tried to commit bank fraud. That tends to set off a few alarms." A heavy silence followed. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then he spoke again, each word strained through disbelief. "You're lying. I'm your husband. I have a right to that money." "Actually," I said, my tone as calm as the steady drizzle outside, "you don't. Uncle Raymond's inheritance was placed in a protected trust, specifically designed to prevent unauthorized access. When you tried to move those funds without my authorization, you triggered Ironcrest's fraud prevention protocols." Another beat of silence. Then his voice came back, high and wild. "We're married. That means we share everything. That's the law." "Not inherited assets placed in protective trusts," I corrected gently, "especially not when the beneficiary has been advised to secure them against potential threats. And when you tried to move the money, Ethan, you didn't just break my trust, you committed identity theft. The bank considers your attempt an act of grand larceny." I could hear his breathing grow ragged, the panic seeping into every word. "Emma, please, you need to call the bank. Tell them you authorized the transfer. We can fix this." "Fix this?" I repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity. "You called me yesterday to announce you were leaving me for someone else. You tried to steal my inheritance. You lied about your golf trip. And now you expect me to save you?" Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke, his voice was low, broken. "I can explain everything." "I'm sure you can," I replied, my voice suddenly sharp. "But I don't need your explanations anymore." I reached for the manila folder I had prepared the night before, filled with copies of financial records, text messages, and screenshots documenting months of suspicious transactions. "I'm filing for divorce today, Ethan. My lawyer will be in touch, and thanks to your little stunt yesterday, you've made her job incredibly easy." "You can't do this," he shouted, his voice rising to a shriek. "That money belongs to both of us." I let the quiet stretch, then answered with an icy finality. "No, Ethan, it really doesn't." I ended the call, turned off my phone, and exhaled a deep breath. Outside, the rain had turned into a soft mist. Today was going to be busy. There were lawyers to call, evidence to deliver, and a future to reclaim. But for the first time in years, I felt strong. Ethan had thought he was orchestrating the perfect betrayal. Instead, he had walked right into the perfect trap. By 9 o'clock that morning, I was sitting across from Jennifer Collins, my attorney at Collins and Reeves, a woman whose reputation for dismantling deceitful spouses was legendary in Portland's legal circles. I had quietly begun consulting Jennifer 3 months earlier when Ethan's behavior started to shift from erratic to suspicious. Now I was grateful I had trusted my instincts. Jennifer scanned the thick folder I handed her, her eyes sharp behind stylish glasses. Inside were months of evidence, screenshots of Ethan's credit card statements showing expensive hotel stays and dinners for two in cities where he claimed he was on business trips, receipts for jewelry I had never received, and banking records that captured his desperate attempts to funnel small amounts of money out of our joint accounts. "This," Jennifer said, tapping the folder with a manicured finger, "is one of the cleanest cases I've ever seen. Ethan has practically gift-wrapped his infidelity and financial misconduct for us." I exhaled a slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "I've been documenting everything. I even hired a private investigator last month when I couldn't ignore the signs anymore." Jennifer looked impressed. "That was wise. Did the investigator find conclusive evidence?" I nodded, pulling my phone from my purse and showing her a series of photos and videos. Ethan walking hand in hand with a young woman outside a luxury hotel in Phoenix. A dinner receipt for two at an upscale restaurant. Time-stamped images of him kissing her in an airport lounge. "Her name is Chloe, and she's 28, I said flatly. "She works at a sports bar he frequents." Jennifer's eyebrows arched. "With this level of proof, we can file for divorce on the grounds of adultery and financial misconduct. His attempted theft of your inheritance will only strengthen our case. It's hard to overstate how much leverage this gives us." "There's more," I added, pulling out another set of documents. "Ethan has been moving money into a secret account for months, small transfers, just below the alert thresholds, but together they add up to nearly $15,000. Jennifer flipped through the pages, her expression growing colder with each line of the bank statements. "Do we know where the money went?" I slid another document across the table, a report from my investigator. "He used it to pay for trips, gifts, and hotel rooms with Chloe. The report includes photos, video footage, and even credit card receipts." Jennifer set the papers down and looked me straight in the eye. "Emma, you've done everything right. This level of preparation will make the divorce proceedings swift and decisive. We'll file immediately, citing adultery and financial malfeasance. Ethan's attempt to steal your inheritance gives us grounds to argue for a complete forfeiture of his claim to marital assets." I felt a surge of gratitude and determination. "I want to move quickly," I told her. "I don't want him to have time to hide or destroy evidence." "You've already outmaneuvered him," Jennifer assured me. "Now we'll make it official." As I left the office, the rain had stopped, replaced by a thin, cold sunlight that spilled across the city streets. I felt lighter with every step, as if the burden I'd carried for years was finally slipping from my shoulders. The betrayal that had once threatened to break me was now the very thing empowering me to reclaim my life. Ethan had spent months planning his grand escape. What he didn't realize was that every lie, every secret transfer, every whispered promise to another woman had laid the perfect foundation for his downfall and my freedom. I had barely settled back into my office at Crestline Logistics when my phone buzzed with a call from Victoria Hale, my financial advisor at Ironcrest. Her professional tone couldn't mask the hint of satisfaction in her voice. "Emma," she began, "Mr. Carter has been calling our offices repeatedly since early this morning. He seems to believe he can resolve the situation by speaking to a supervisor." I almost laughed. "What have you told him?" "That any investigation into attempted unauthorized access to protected trusts must proceed through proper legal channels," Victoria replied crisply. "Additionally, his attempted transfer triggered security protocols that can only be reversed by a court order, something we both know he's unlikely to obtain now." I leaned back in my chair, feeling a cold sense of triumph settle over me. "What exactly does that mean for him?" I asked. It means his attempt has been reported to federal banking authorities as suspicious activity. His social security number has been flagged in our system as a potential threat, and any future attempts to access accounts connected to your trust will automatically notify law enforcement. I let the information sink in. Uncle Raymond's obsessive precautions, which I once thought excessive, were proving to be the perfect shield. Ethan's greed had activated a series of traps he could never have seen coming. There's something else, Victoria continued. When we reviewed our records, we discovered that Mr. Carter had been making inquiries about your accounts for several months. He called posing as your financial advisor and even attempted to visit one of our branches in person, claiming he needed details about your trust. My hands tightened on the armrests of my chair. And you refused, of course? Of course, she confirmed. We logged each incident as suspicious activity. But given what's happened now, this establishes a clear pattern of premeditation. I'll prepare a complete dossier and courier it to your attorney. Thank you, Victoria, I said quietly. Your thoroughness means everything to me. After the call ended, I sat staring at my office window, watching the clouds drift past the Portland skyline. Ethan hadn't just made a rash mistake in a moment of anger. He had been scheming for months, trying to steal what didn't belong to him. His betrayal was deeper, colder, and far more calculated than I had ever imagined. My phone buzzed with a new text from an unknown number. This is Chloe. Ethan told me what you did to him. You're a vindictive witch who doesn't deserve a man like him. He's happier with me than he ever was with you. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back with steady hands. Tell Ethan that when he's arrested for bank fraud, he'll have plenty of time to reflect on how happy you made him. The response came almost instantly. Arrested? What are you talking about? I didn't bother to reply. Instead, I forwarded the entire exchange to Jennifer, adding a note. Evidence of ongoing affair and contact information for the other woman. For the rest of the day, I kept my routine as normal as possible. Meetings, reports, polite small talk with colleagues. No one needed to know that my personal life was unraveling in dramatic fashion. Yet beneath the calm facade, I felt something new, strength. Ethan had believed he could control me, manipulate me, and then discard me when it suited him. But his arrogance had led him straight into a labyrinth of security measures and legal protections he could never escape. Now, every frantic call, every desperate plea only confirmed his unraveling and my growing certainty that the life I wanted was finally within reach. 3 days later, as a pale sun finally broke through the Portland clouds, my phone rang with a call I'd been half dreading, half expecting. It was Agent Ramirez, one of the federal investigators who had visited my office. His voice was crisp, but carried a hint of satisfaction. Mrs. Carter, I wanted to inform you that we've taken your husband into custody on charges of attempted bank fraud, identity theft, and violation of federal banking regulations, he said. I set down the knife I'd been using to chop vegetables for dinner, my heart beating steadily. Where was he arrested? Phoenix International Airport. He was attempting to board a flight to Costa Rica with his companion, Agent Ramirez replied. Apparently fleeing the country while under federal investigation isn't the wisest decision. Thank you for letting me know, I said calmly, though inside a surge of relief and vindication washed through me. As soon as I ended the call, I phoned Jennifer. Her laughter was soft but unmistakable. Ethan's arrest will expedite the divorce proceedings considerably, she said. A spouse facing federal charges for financial crimes has no leverage in divorce negotiations. This is the break we needed. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the quiet of my kitchen, listening to the gentle rain outside. My phone vibrated with a series of voicemails from Chloe, each one more frantic than the last. The first was an angry tirade accusing me of destroying Ethan's life. By the third, her tone had shifted to pleading, begging me to help the man I once loved. I deleted them all without listening further. The next morning, a courier arrived with a thick envelope bearing Ironcrest's seal. Inside were final security reports, records of Ethan's failed attempts to breach the trust, and a handwritten note from Victoria. Your uncle's legacy remains secure. He would be proud of your strength. 6 weeks later, I stood in a hushed courtroom as Judge Wilkins finalized our divorce decree. Ethan appeared on a video link from federal detention, his face gaunt and eyes hollow. His public defender had advised him to accept the settlement in full, given the overwhelming evidence and his looming criminal charges. The defendant forfeits any claim to marital assets due to his attempted fraudulent access to protected accounts, Judge Wilkins declared. This divorce is granted with prejudice. All financial arrangements are final and non-negotiable. As I stepped out of the courthouse into a crisp autumn breeze, my phone buzzed with a message from my sister, Hannah. Saw the news. Ethan got 28 months in federal prison. Are you okay? I texted back without hesitation. Never been better. That afternoon, I met Victoria in her office at Ironcrest to discuss investment strategies. The inheritance, combined with the assets I retained through the divorce, gave me options I'd never dared dream of: early retirement, starting my own accounting firm, or perhaps traveling the world the way I'd always wanted. There's one more thing, Victoria said softly, sliding a sealed envelope across the desk. Your uncle left this for you, to be opened once all legal matters were settled. I broke the seal with trembling hands and unfolded the letter. In Uncle Raymond's familiar, looping handwriting, it read, Emma, if you're reading this, it means someone tried to take what wasn't theirs. I hope my preparations kept you safe. Remember, true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in peace of mind. Build something beautiful with what remains. Tears pricked at my eyes, not of sorrow, but of release. I carefully folded the letter and tucked it into my purse, knowing Uncle Raymond's final gift was far greater than any sum of money. It was the reminder that I deserved to choose my own future, free from fear or betrayal. As I drove home along the rain-slicked streets of Portland, the world felt full of possibility. The woman who had once doubted her own strength was gone. In her place stood someone unbreakable, someone ready to build a life on her own terms, and no one would ever take that away from me again. A month after the final court date, Portland was bursting with spring blossoms, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was blooming too. The weight of Ethan's lies no longer hung over me. Instead, there was a clarity and freedom in every breath. I spent my mornings walking along the Willamette River, savoring the peace that came with knowing my life was truly my own. One bright morning, I walked into a small commercial space in the Pearl District, a place I had passed countless times before but never dared to imagine as mine. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows, catching on the polished wood floors. I pictured a sleek reception area, a conference room where I could meet with clients, and a cozy corner for a coffee bar. By the end of the week, the lease was signed, and I officially launched my own accounting practice, Hawthorne Financial Consulting. Starting my own firm had been a dream I'd tucked away years ago, overshadowed by Ethan's constant schemes. Now it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I thought I'd lost forever. The first clients were referrals from friends and former colleagues, small business owners, independent contractors, people who needed someone meticulous and trustworthy. I threw myself into the work, building not just a business but a reputation for integrity and precision. Word spread quickly. Before long, I was fielding calls from clients who had heard about the woman who had protected her inheritance so well that her husband ended up behind bars. In the evenings, instead of worrying about Ethan's whereabouts or moods, I took cooking classes, tried yoga, and even booked a solo trip to Scotland, somewhere I'd always dreamed of going but never thought I could. Standing on the cliffs of the Isle of Skye weeks later, the wind whipping through my hair, I felt more alive than I ever had in my 22-year marriage. Back home, I framed Uncle Raymond's final letter and hung it in my office. Clients often asked about it, and I would smile, telling them it was a reminder that true security comes from preparation and the courage to protect what matters. One evening, while organizing paperwork, I found the last journal I'd kept during the worst months of my marriage. Reading my own words, filled with fear and self-doubt, brought tears to my eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were gratitude. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone wiser, stronger, and unafraid to choose herself every single day. The news of Ethan's 28-month prison sentence eventually faded from headlines, and Chloe's desperate messages stopped coming. I learned she had moved out of Portland, leaving Ethan's empty promises behind. I felt nothing but relief. At my practice's 6-month anniversary, I hosted a small gathering for friends, clients, and the mentors who had supported me. As we raised glasses of champagne, I realized how far I'd come, from a woman trapped in a crumbling marriage to a successful entrepreneur who had built something beautiful from the ashes. I knew Uncle Raymond would have been proud. But more importantly, I was proud of myself. For the first time in decades, I wasn't surviving, I was thriving. And whatever came next, I was ready to face it with open eyes, an open heart, and an unshakable belief in my own worth. Months passed, and with every sunrise, my life felt more like mine than ever before. My practice, Hawthorne Financial Consulting, was thriving beyond what I could have dreamed. But even more important was the sense of peace that had settled into my days. There were no more secret accounts to worry about, no more excuses to decipher, no more pretending that love alone could sustain a marriage built on deception. One rainy afternoon, as I sat in my office finishing tax filings, a new client arrived. She was a young woman, barely 30, with shadows under her eyes and a hesitance in her voice that reminded me painfully of myself years ago. She had discovered her husband was hiding debts and gambling away their savings, and she didn't know what to do or who to trust. As I listened to her story, I realized that what I had survived wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was an education. An education in recognizing red flags, in reading financial documents with eyes wide open, in valuing my own safety and future over loyalty to someone who saw me as a means to an end. Protect yourself, I told her gently as I handed her a folder of resources I had put together over the past year. Contacts for lawyers, financial planners, and support groups. Trust can be beautiful, but it should never blind you to reality. Love doesn't mean ignoring the facts. She wiped a tear from her cheek and thanked me, and when she left, I sat for a long moment staring at the framed letter from Uncle Raymond on my wall. His words, "The greatest wealth is peace of mind," had become more than advice. They were a mantra that guided every decision I made. I started offering free seminars at local community centers about financial literacy and asset protection. The first evening, only 5 women showed up. By the 4th month, the room was packed, filled with people eager to learn how to protect their hard-earned savings from predators, romantic or otherwise. Every time someone told me, "I wish I'd known this sooner," I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. From my own pain, something beautiful had grown. A mission to help others avoid the traps I fell into. To empower people to read every line of a contract and question every unexplained charge. I taught them that security wasn't about hoarding money, but about understanding it, planning for the worst, even as you hope for the best. When the first anniversary of my divorce arrived, I hosted a small dinner at my home. Friends gathered around my kitchen table, laughing and toasting to new beginnings. As the night wound down, I stood in the quiet of my living room, candlelight flickering on the framed letter. I realized I wasn't just free from Ethan. I was free from the fear that had once ruled my every choice. My story had come full circle, from devastation to empowerment, from betrayal to purpose. The greatest lesson I took with me wasn't about guarding money, but about guarding myself. My peace, my dreams, my worth. I learned that trust is something earned every day, never given blindly. And that sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you is the very thing that sets you free. As spring turned to summer in Portland, the scent of blooming roses drifted through open windows, and the city felt full of possibility. My life had found a rhythm I cherished. Mornings spent meeting with clients who trusted me with their financial futures. Afternoons devoted to expanding my seminars on inheritance protection and financial independence. Evenings spent with friends who had stood by me through the storm. But as content as I felt, I knew my journey wasn't complete. I wanted to do more than safeguard my own assets, or those of a handful of clients. I wanted to honor Uncle Raymond's legacy by ensuring that people, especially women, understood that they could take control of their financial lives long before a crisis struck. I partnered with a local nonprofit to create the Raymond Initiative, a program designed to teach financial literacy to survivors of domestic abuse and those at risk of financial exploitation. We offered workshops on everything from setting up secure bank accounts to understanding the basics of trusts and estate planning. Watching the participants' eyes light up as they realized they could protect themselves was one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life. During a quiet weekend retreat I organized for women rebuilding their lives, I sat by a crackling fire with a group of participants. One woman, a mother of 3, asked if I regretted ever meeting Ethan. The question made me pause, staring into the flames. "I don't regret it," I finally said, "because every mistake I made, every betrayal I endured, led me here to a life where I know my own strength and can help others find theirs." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken understanding. We all knew that pain could shatter you, but it could also remake you into something stronger than you ever imagined. At home, I began sketching plans to write a book about my journey part memoir, part financial guide, so that others could learn from my experiences without paying the price I had. Each evening, I'd write a few pages, weaving together the painful moments and the lessons they left behind, determined to turn my story into a lifeline for someone else. Meanwhile, Hawthorne Financial Consulting grew steadily. Word of mouth and community outreach kept my calendar full, yet I never lost sight of the promise I'd made to myself in the darkest days, to never again let anyone's ambitions or insecurities overshadow my own goals. Sometimes, when the rain returned and mist rolled down the hills outside my kitchen window, I'd sit with a cup of tea and reread Uncle Raymond's letter. The words no longer stung, they felt like a shield, a reminder that I had not just survived but risen, with a life richer and more meaningful than I could have imagined. The betrayal that once threatened to break me had instead built a foundation for a future I was finally excited to step into. And as I looked ahead, I knew the best chapters of my life were still waiting to be written by my own hand, on my own terms. In the end, this journey wasn't just about protecting an inheritance or exposing a betrayal. It was about discovering the unshakable value of self-respect, courage, and preparation. Life will always throw challenges our way, and sometimes the people we trust most will disappoint us. But what matters is how we rise after we fall, how we transform our pain into purpose, and how we protect our dreams from those who would take them for granted. Remember, true wealth isn't measured by the numbers in your bank account, but by the peace in your heart and the strength to choose what's right for you, even when it's the hardest thing you've ever done. Your worth is not defined by anyone else's choices. It is defined by the love, wisdom, and resilience you carry within. I hope Emma's story inspires you to look closely at your own life, to value yourself, and to never be afraid to fight for the future you deserve. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters and might help someone else going through the same struggles. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss more powerful stories like this one. Together, let's build a community where everyone learns to protect what truly matters and to live boldly with eyes wide open.